That is John Candy with his friend and colleague of long-standing, Eugene Levy, in a scene from a new movie called Armed and Dangerous. I just made a comment about that actor. Tell me his name
Larry
again.
Hankin.
He's very funny.
He used to be with the committee and with Second City.
I remember the committee. Now I remember where I know him from.
Larry's one of the members of that group, or was one of the members of
Now,
that
did
group.
you know him in Chicago?
Yes, I did, actually. Larry was touring with the committee when I was first there in '73. They came through town, they were playing at a club there, and they came over and workshopped with us and were teaching us. It was great. It was a wonderful week that they were there. We had a lot of fun. We'd join them, and then they join us in the sets. It was great.
Is it true that when you went to Chicago to do that job with Second City that you thought you were going for 2 weeks and stayed a year?
Yeah.
Really?
Absolutely.
It's not one of those press stories now where a guy said, I had a 2-week job that lasted a year?
I was hired here in Toronto by Bernie Solins, Del Close, and Joe Flaherty. I went to the audition. What was that church on Bathurst and Bloor?
I know the one you mean.
Yeah. They had all the rehearsals down there, and then they had callbacks the next day, and then Bernie called me on the phone and said, how would you like to go down to Chicago for a couple of weeks? I said, sure. I said, what about the theater up here? He said, well, we want you to go down to Chicago for a couple of weeks just to get to know the stage there and work with that group there while Brian Doyle Murray and Joe Flaherty come up here to Toronto. I said, okay, so I packed for 2 weeks, not knowing you had to go across the border with a visa. And it was at the time when they were checking for draft dodgers coming across. So I was, never really left Toronto for any long period of time, especially by myself, even though I was 22. I was like, well, okay, here I go. And I didn't know what to expect from Chicago. Elliot Ness and the Untouchables, the Chicago Blackhawks. I didn't know too much about the city. Big, kind of scary. Got into the airport, and the customs pulled me aside, and they thought I was a draft dodger. So they brought out the big book, and they started going through the pages. And now I'm frightened because these people are supposed to meet me, Joyce Sloan, and I'm now like 45 minutes, and I have no way of getting to them. And I don't know what these people are doing. And eventually, the 3 supervisors came over, and they were looking at me, eyeballing me, and one said, it was just during the time of the hockey playoffs. I said, who do you like, the Blackhawks or the Canadians? I said, Blackhawks. He said, go on through. I stamped something, and I was gone. I got in the country, and started out with him, and I was there for a year and change, really. That was, that was my 2-week trip.
Is it true, John, that it was
I had
Dan
no idea.
Aykroyd and Valerie Bromfield who almost tricked you
They
into
did.
the audition?
No, they did trick me into it. They invited.
How did they trick you?
They had this audition. They were already in Second City. They wanted. They said, "You should join this. You should join this. You get involved. They'll love you. You're funny. You'll do it." I said, "No. I can fool around with you guys, but I can't do that stuff. And besides, it's a tough audition. I can't go in there. Everybody in town is in there. Everybody across Canada was in this place. Anybody who was funny, everybody from Party Game. Everybody was Molson Golden commercials at the time. Everybody who was big in Canada in comedy was there, and I'll never get a chance." They said, "Well, we got to be down there anyway. Meet us down there for lunch." And I was doing a children's theater show at the time, and I was out Rumpelstiltskin in Etobicoke, and I went down there. I was waiting around. I was looking at everybody, kind of in awe. You see everybody from Godspell. It's Gilda Radner over there, Gene Levy, Jerry Salzberg. Wow. It's just a big group of people that I'd seen on television. And I hear John Candy being paged. And Valerie says, come on, you go in, come on, we put your name down. I was like, oh, I'll kill you for doing this to me. And I went into this theater, and I was and Andy Arway and I went in. And I'll never forget that. We went in, and I was just, and they said, going up on stage, Del Close, going up on stage there, this is a department store exercise. The object of the game is give and take. You sit over here, you're the information clerk at an imaginary department store in which the store has anything. So your objective is to give this man any information he needs. That's all we want from you. And you come through a revolving door 5 times as fast as you can, 5 completely different characters. All right, begin. Just went, wow, the sweat was all over me.
Did your mind go back to that night at the lake shore when you were in that lounge,
Yes.
and your friend at the time did not have the courage to get up on stage with you. And you told a wonderful story, but you looked out in this deserted lounge on the lake shore, and you saw a truck driver, a guy with his girlfriend. You went absolutely blank. And did somebody really get up?
Somebody
and you
from
did
the
an interview
CBC,
thing?
I wish the heck I knew who it was. Somebody came up and they said they worked with the CBC in some capacity and started doing an interview scene with me. I was doing the worst impressions of my life. I was doing John Wayne, Jimmy Stewart. I was just shaking.
The beginning and
I
end of
swear,
your
all I
stand-up
saw was
days.
a tray go by of drinks. You know, oh.
I have to ask you something because now we know that it's true, that it was Dan Aykroyd and Valerie Bromfield who got you that audition,
Yes,
or
they
got
did.
you there.
Yep.
When the original announcement came out for Armed and Dangerous and Columbia Pictures was waving a banner, I had the impression that John Candy would star with Dan Aykroyd, directed by John Carpenter.
Yes.
Now, moviegoers have You with Eugene Levy, directed by Mark Lester. Can you tell us, John, what happens along the way between press releases, announcements, and a movie really arriving in a theater? What happened to Dan Aykroyd and John Carpenter?
I became involved with the project, I guess, in 1984, December of 1984. I was asked if I'd read for this project. This Armed and Dangerous goes back, I think, to 1979, 78. It was originally written for Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi. Created by James Keach and Brian Grazer. Harold Ramis got involved with it. Harold did a draft. It went on, I think Harold and Dan were going to do it at one point, and it evolved to where I was going to do it with Danny, and John Carpenter was going to direct. They asked me, I said, oh, sure, I'd love to. I finished off Volunteers and Summer Rental. I was about to go down to Los Angeles to start shooting on it. I got a couple phone calls from people saying, well, Dan's not doing it, John's not doing it. I said, but I'm still doing it. I have a contract, I'm set. As a matter of fact, I've just about closed the deal on a house down there for the summer. I just sent a check in. Well, if you want to come down, that's great, but we're not shooting it. I said, well, you know, what do I do? I've got a contract here. I'm ready to go to work. I said, well, we're not doing the picture. So it was getting into a very legal mess at that point, and I waited until the July 30th, I think, was the day they had to, the last day they had to start shooting it. Then my contract was in breach, and then Columbia said, no, it's an act of God, and this and that. It got very messy, and I was kind of upset at the whole process, because I was ready to go to work on this. But I understood Dan and John not wanting to do it for various reasons, or creative and artistic reasons they had for not doing the picture. But still, I was stuck. And it would have got, I think, into probably about 5 or 6 years of legal work. And Gene and I were starting to work in September. September, October, we were back here in Toronto, and we were kicking around an idea to do a movie together. We enjoyed working with each other, so it was, I thought, geez, you know, that Armed and Dangerous might not be bad. You know, it's written already, it's there. We'll switch the roles. I'll take Dan's role, I'll play the cop, he played a lawyer. He read it, he liked it. So we called up and said, okay, here's a compromise. You know, let's not get into this legal gobbledygook. Would you be interested in the two of us doing it and say find another director? He said, yeah, fine, go. We sent him a copy of the Schmingies, The Last Polka, because they didn't really know our work that well together, and some SCTV shows. And they said, oh, God, wonderful chemistry.
Had
You guys are
Splash
great.
not played yet?
Sure it was.
I mean, speaking of another little bit of work.
I know, but you know.
Tell you what, hold on to that, and we'll take a break and come back with another scene showing what you and Eugene do in Armed and Dangerous. And continue. Be right back with John Candy. John Candy as Frank Dooley on his way to a rendezvous with his fellow security guard, Eugene Levy, who is Norman Kane, and obviously encountering difficulties along the way. Did you have some input in terms of your scenes with Eugene? Because when I read stories now, whether it's Steven Spielberg or whomever you're working with saying, oh, that's all right, you can write that moment. Was there an input with the scenes between the two of you?
Yeah, definitely. We worked, that's the way we always work most comfortably together, is whatever fits for us. So it doesn't really matter who's saying it to us. We'll always, we'll work on that for you.
You know, watching your work with Eugene in Armed and Dangerous and remembering that after Splash came out, I'm not minimizing any of the work that preceded it, whether it was theater or Second City, the Canadian feature films, the work you were doing in Chicago, that stop in Pasadena, California, when you were commuting from Pasadena to Toronto. Did you ever think, was that 74?
Yeah, 74, 75.
How long did you do that, back and forth, Pasadena, California, Toronto?
God, I must have made about 8, 10 trips. No, because I came back to do Clown Murders, I came back to do Find the Lady, and a few other things.
Was the Clown Murders the one you did with Heath Lamberts? Was Heath Lamberts in that one?
No. No, who was
confused
in that? Stephen Young was in that,
Right.
Martin Burke directed that, Alan Waxman was in that, Larry Dane was in that, Gary Reinecke was in that, John Bayless. Shot it just north of the city here, the Massey Ferguson farm.
John, what was the movie that you did before the Hollywood films, where they dyed your hair black, put a mustache on you, and you were playing a Frenchman, perhaps 50 or so?
55-year-old French used car salesman. A George Siegel movie, Mel Frank directed, Lost and Found.
With Glenda Jackson?
With Glenda Jackson, of course.
I suppose at that point, all you could do, John, as an actor is say,
what do you do?
Is say, it's a sketch. I will regard this as a 7-minute moment in my life in which I'm creating a character.
God. No, I walked into the office to audition for this, for Mel Frank, and he looked at me, and he leapt across the table, he grabbed my cheeks, he says, I love this face, look at this face on this kid. How do I age it? How do I? And he grabbed me across out of his office into somebody else. Look at the face I've got here, I've got a funny face. I want to make it 55. So he got makeup in there, and they said, what do we do to this? How do we age this baby fat? What do we do to this? I'm like, ow! He says, I don't know, I want you to have the job. There's nothing else in the picture. You got to have this. You got to do it. I'll make it work. So they dyed my hair. They called me in, and they said, we're going to give you a permanent. I said, well, how long does that last? Oh, it'll be out in a couple days. And the dye? Oh, it'll shampoo out. And I grew this real bad beard. They said, well, grow whatever you can, and we'll fill in the rest. I have the worst beard in the world. It's gross looking. It's just kind of gnarly and stuff. And then they dyed that, and my hair, the permanent took for 6 months, and the dye came out in different colors. So it went from, it was black, it was a real bad raven black too, and when it went to a purple, and then it started going into a pink, and it was like so embarrassing. God, I didn't realize how dumb I looked. I'm just walking down the street and people are just looking at me. Oh, it was so embarrassing. And for what? What did I do? I was not convincing as a 55-year-old French used car salesman. I'm
When
sorry.
you were giving us the...
I take full responsibility for Lost and Found not doing well. At least that's what Mel Frank said. He blamed me for that.
I think it's extraordinary because I remember after you did Splash, the success and people noticing you on that level in terms of a big commercial hit, somebody asked you about the future and you said, I'm not really interested in directing. I don't have the zest for that. I have the zest for being in front of the camera. Then you found yourself in the wilds of Mexico, you said, in an apartment that had cockroaches the size of footballs. And one day you got a phone call from a man named Ned Tannen, which might not have been unusual if he hadn't been the head of the studio, asking you if you would consider working with Carl Reiner, because Carl Reiner would only direct Summer Rental if you agreed to act in it. And I still think it's wonderful that your reaction was, Alan Brady from the Dick Van Dyke Show wants to work with me?
I'm working with Alan Brady.
You know, he's crazy about you. He's very generous about you, publicly and privately.
He's a wonderful man. God, he's so talented. It's a great experience working with Carl. Just immediate, just on the phone, I called him up. And he was just so nice, so gracious. And I even told him, I said, I'm working with Alan Brady. And he started laughing, singing. He began singing his theme song from the Dick Van Dyke Show. He was wonderful.
On that, we'll take another commercial break. Okay?
Yeah,
Be right back with John Candy. John Candy is with us. We've been talking around and about Armed and Dangerous, and I had told that story about you and Carl Reiner. And the finale to it was that after Splash, you said, no, you'd save the zest you felt for in front of the camera. But after working with Carl Reiner, and let's also point out, Summer Rental, unless I'm mistaken, was shot in 8 weeks, was packaged and in movie theaters in the short, I mean, it set a record.
In 9 weeks, I think.
And also, it made a lot of money for
It did
Paramount
well, you know,
Pictures.
it made its money back, and plus, and that was exciting.
Didn't you say after working with Carl Reiner that, yes, you were interested in directing?
Yes.
What
I
happened?
did, and I've changed my mind again. But if I go back to Carl again, I may switch it back. He made it look so much fun. He allowed me to be part of the process of making the movie, and he walked me through it, and was showing me what he was doing. And I really hadn't paid that much attention before. I mean, I paid attention to directors, obviously, but Carl was showing me technically how to go through it and what he was looking for. And that was very interesting, very exciting for me. And he took me into the editing room, showed me what he was doing, how to do it. He wanted my input on it. That was the first time anybody really said, well, what do you think? What do you like? Do you like your take here, or do you like your take over there? That's the first time I'd had those options, aside from working at Second City. My God, I love this man. This is what making movies is. Yes, yes, he's, you know, just given me newfound energies in other directions.
Did you really make that remark that is now credited to you, to Steven Spielberg at a Hollywood cocktail party, when you looked around the room, long before you'd done 1941, or
Oh, yes.
Stripes?
Oh,
And
yes.
could you tell us what you really said to Steven Spielberg when you saw all the leeches and the hangers-on hovering around him?
Well, I thanked him for, we had a big party at our house. We were finishing off writing a season of SCTV, and this party grew from 100 people to about 1,000 people, maybe exaggerating a little bit, but it's very close to that. The house was just wall-to-wall people, outside, inside, and Steven Spielberg was there. And I had had a couple drinks, and people were coming over to me and saying, Steven Spielberg is here. He's here. He wants to see you. I'm like, yeah, okay, right. You know, thank you. Excuse me, I've got a drink to get here. And an hour later, they said, he's waiting for you. And thinking, you know, it was a joke, I went over there, and there he was. He was just surrounded by a lot of people. And he says, John, I really like your work. And I'm, oh, thanks very much. And I had a lot more confidence because I was under the influence of a couple of rum and cokes at the time. But he said, I'd like you to do this picture in 1941. I have a role in it for you, and I think you'd be perfect. And I said, oh, geez, I really appreciate that. You know, I think there's a lot of other people around here who want the job a little harder than I do. They're working a little harder for it. I said, I really appreciate that. I know it's a party, and we've all been drinking, so thank you very much. And I appreciate that you watched SCTV. He said, no, I really want you for the movie. Yeah, okay, thanks. I think I said a few other things, too. It was all a blur after that.
I think it's important, John, to end this conversation by pointing out that you established the rules right off the top with Hollywood.
Yes, I did.
And you've had integrity all along. And we'll pick up on this another time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
John Candy is with us. It's a pleasure to see you. And it's a pleasure to be sitting here with you. You know, I did something a few moments ago. I gave you a copy of a film review written by Pauline Kael in the New Yorker magazine because I said I wanted you to read what Pauline Kael had said about your friend Andrea Martin and a number of the SCTV family, including Eugene Levy and Rick Moranis and the people who did Club Paradise. And of course, I knew the story about what Pauline Kael had written about you at the time of Splash. And the feeling is that industry people read Pauline Kael, and Pauline Kael can have a profound effect on what producers, as opposed to directors,
Yes, indeed.
think about you. Did that rave she gave you really affect your career? Did you get a feedback from producers saying, I read Pauline Kael? in New
Yes, I
Yorker?"
did, actually. Yes. I think it was very influential for me. I received a lot of phone calls that week that came out. And as people started taking me a little more seriously, I started, people were actually offering me work on a regular basis. And that, Splash really helped me a lot, and Pauline Kael's review didn't hurt at all.
I have a question for you. Why? Tell me why now, in your opinion. We can talk about the extraordinary and deserved success you have had, and how Eugene Levy and Rick Moranis and Marty Short and some of your other friends and colleagues have joined you in that success. But Andrea Martin, with all the wonderful work, and Catherine O'Hara with her brilliance, why, John, has it been tougher for the women out of the SCTV group? And there are people who keep saying to me, Valerie Bromfeld could be a star, but she seems reluctant. She doesn't want to be a star. Well, does Catherine not want to be a star? Do you think Andrea doesn't want to be a star? Is it slower for women?
In general, it is. I think in this business, it is slower for women. It's harder for women. I have no idea why they weren't just scooped up from the first season of SCTV, seeing what they could do. Why people weren't just pounding on their doors saying, "Ooh, give me these two." I think they're such incredibly talented people, and it's so gifted, and yet they're fighting to get a role here and there. You know, Catherine picks and chooses her roles. She really does. I mean, After Hours, Heartburn, she saw things in those roles, the people she wanted to work with. That doesn't mean I don't think she turned down a lot of things. I don't think Catherine wanted to play, you know, the wife here in this role. You know, I think she was offered. Catherine, I hope you don't mind me talking about this. Vacation. She didn't want to play it. She said, "No, I don't want to just be setting up all the time." She didn't see the character. I mean,
You're talking about National Lampoon's
National
Vacation?
Lampoon's Vacation.
In which you first time you played a security guard?
Yes.
As opposed to Armed and Dangerous, in which you play a security guard.
Park was closed that day.
Former policeman.
Yes.
I find that fascinating, you know, because I agree with you, and what I'm saying out loud is I think Andrea Martin and Catherine O'Hara are extraordinary, brilliant performers. I can appreciate Catherine saying, "I'll work with Martin Scorsese, I'll work with Mike Nichols." The prestige of working with those people, but then you want to see more. You want to see them, you know, as you did with Carl Reiner, carry the movie. And then they can say, as you did, "Gee, it's not quite the same as a supporting role." You don't pack up and just go home. You work a lot harder sustaining a movie. Maybe that's a contributing factor too. I don't know.
Yes, quite possibly. I would hope that Club Paradise will do a lot for. I know it will do a lot for Andrea. I think she's going to be doing 3 Kate and Alleys this year. I know, which is a very successful show, and it'd be good for her, good exposure for Andrea, for people to start seeing her again. Because SCTV had really limited viewership. Although we were in syndication, we are in syndication now. We're on in a lot of markets, but still a lot of people hadn't seen the show.
Now, John, what's going on? Are you one of the principals behind the plan for the SCTV Family Primetime U.S. network?
Madame Dufarge, I sit there and knit,
looking at certain executives saying, "Guillotine, guillotine."
Jacques 1, Jacques 2.
Is it really in the works?
Yeah, I had a meeting with Kim LeMaster, who's president of CBS right now, and said, I'd first called all the cast and said, "Would you be interested in doing maybe a show, if it's possible?" Everybody said, "Yeah." And I was surprised. I didn't know everybody, you know, felt the same way. You know, we had talked about it, and I don't think anybody wanted to do a series again. Everybody's careers are going different ways, but how about just doing one? And kind of a reunion show. So I went to CBS. I had an association with Kim LeMaster, and he loved the idea. So I called everybody back, and I said, "I think they're interested." And now it's in the works. It's in business affairs. So if all works well, there'll be a 9-man company doing an hour special on prime time for CBS.
While we're talking about extraordinary women, I have to resolve something with you. There's a woman in Los Angeles who, when she gets people in her home, almost puts them in a chair and ties them up while she screens The Last Polka, which she keeps telling the world is one of the greatest, funniest, most wonderful things that have ever happened in the world of show business, and that John Candy and Eugene Levy are brilliant. Now, B. Arthur keeps saying, "I love him. I'm going to give John and Rose the welcome to L.A. to this canyon party."
I know.
How did B. Arthur enter yours and Eugene Levy's life? What is the history of this friendship?
Our costumer on the movie, Betty Lee Balsam, said, "You know, a friend of mine is just in love with you guys." I said, "Oh, who's that?" "B. Arthur." I said, "You're kidding. Big fan of yours. Great fan of yours. Would you have lunch with her?" I said, "Are you kidding?" "Sure." And we met. She was like the sweetest lady, so funny. This great lunch. And she said, I'm throwing a party for you. Oh, you don't have to do that. I'm throwing a party for you. Welcome to LA. Do you want dancing? I don't know. I'll open the tennis court. We're having a party. You're a neighbor now. I said, no, you really don't have to do that. Said, no, it's done. Consider it done. You just named the date. She was like, Maud, you know, okay.
Have you named the date?
You jump when B says, no, I've been kind of sidestepping it. I'm embarrassed of that.
You know one of the things I like about her? Whatever you say to B. Arthur listens to you, and then she says, what are you saying to me?
Yes.
And you go, just a minute. And then you repeat it. What are you saying to me? Are you saying, and I mean, the woman's extraordinary, but we know her talents
Yes.
as an actress. And I don't know if people are aware of that woman's history on the New York stage.
She did a
the
lot.
work she did in the theater, the training. It's extraordinary, just extraordinary.
Oh, she told me a story about Mel Brooks. She went to, when she first came to Los Angeles, they all stayed in the same hotel. I can't remember the name of the hotel. And Mel was there. And they knew each other from New York. And he said, what are you up to? She said, not much. You want to come up, have a drink? So Mel comes up. They're talking away. We're talking about how funny Mel Brooks can be. So she goes into her little kitchenette to make a couple gin and tonics. And still continuing this conversation, this straight conversation about New York and who's doing what and who's where. She turns around, Mel Brooks is completely nude, sitting there, just continuing to talk. She just went, just for a joke. And that's what it was like back then. You know, we were talking about shows and knowing all those people and how insane Mel Brooks was.
Do you imagine how Mel Brooks and Anne Bancroft are an evening at home now when Gene Wilder and Gilda Radner come over, their new best friends? We'll take
really?
a break on that, okay? Be right back with John Candy and more right after this.
John Candy is my favorite of them all.
Why is John your favorite,
He's
James?
just the funniest guy I've ever been around.
You're going to work together?
We worked together. Saturday Night Live, the first show that I did,
Right.
he hosted. And I was so nervous, I could barely speak. And Candy would just sit there and make me cry with laughter. Just making fun of me or doing these characters, you know, as Johnny LaRue guy. And he held my hand through that show, and he was the host. And he held my hand. He was really sweet.
There is somebody saying something wonderful about you,
It
John.
certainly was.
I had a
Thank
very
you, Jim.
good time with him, you know.
Isn't he a nice guy?
Yep, beyond the fact that I admired what he had done in About Last Night and looked forward to the conversation with him and knew of the exchange between the two of you. Is he about to work with Dan Aykroyd? What's going on now with Dragnet?
Tom Hanks, I thought, was
Tom
doing that.
is doing Dragnet?
I thought so.
I just thought Jim Belushi
Jim
had
would
been
be great
announced
in
for
that.
something else too that I thought Dan was involved in. I don't know. While I'm on this, let me ask you another question. When I was asking about the history of Armed and Dangerous, am I right in believing that somewhere along the line Orion Pictures said that John Candy and Steve Martin would star in Three Amigos?
Yes.
Is that true?
That was true, yes.
May I ask you what happened to that one along the way? Since we know Marty Short is in it with Chevy Chase and Steve Martin.
Right. I just didn't feel comfortable with the project at that time. I wanted to work with Steve, and they showed me the script. It was, there were a few other projects pending around that time, and this looked like it was going to go on for a little longer. And I just really wasn't ready to do that one at the time. I wanted to go into something that was a little closer to production. And it looked like it was going to be a long writing schedule and back and forth. And I hadn't moved to Los Angeles, so it looked like they were going to write there. I was going to be up in Toronto, and I thought, oh, I can't do this. This is going to be 6 months writing, and I'm going to be away from home. I don't want to do that. So I decided I'd stay here and take another project a little closer. So I ended up in Mexico. I think, no.
Now we're talking
That's
about,
what. That's really what.
that was
it
the
just didn't work
volunteers
out.
time.
Yeah.
You came back from Mexico
It
and
was
found
all around that
yourself-
time they wanted to do it. Three Amigos has been around for about 3 years. I just saw Lauren on a plane, Lauren Michaels on a plane yesterday. I feel a little nervous around him. You know, it's odd when you turn down a script. I feel real guilty.
Did Marty
Seeing
Short
this-
call you and ask your advice? Or did you find out by reading a newspaper that Marty was doing the movie with
Yeah,
Chevy
that's how I
Chase?
found out.
Really?
Well, they were originally the movie was going to go shoot in Europe. It was going to shoot in Spain. They were going to shoot in Italy. Then they were talking about shooting in Mexico. I thought, I'm not going to go over there. I don't, you know, I don't want to do that right now. I said, I don't want to haul everybody over there, and we're going to be flying. Then they said, yeah, we'll live in London, and you'll fly back and forth on the weekends to Spain. I said, no, I don't want to do that. That's not what I want to. And I told Marty, I said, let's write down a list, the pros and cons, what's going on here. And this list kind of weighed heavy on why not to do it. And I said, all right, well, I'm going to call Lauren. I got to call him and tell him I can't do it. I was like real nervous about it because, you know, I wanted to work on this picture, but the way it was going, I just didn't see it was going to work in my life. And I thought Marty was in agreement with me. And I find out Marty's doing the picture. But it worked out great because they shot it, I think, in Arizona and Los Angeles. So there I'm out of a job.
Now, I know you're friendly with Norman Jewison. Has Norman Jewison come up with a property for you recently?
No, not yet.
No?
No, nothing.
Well, maybe he knows how busy you are with Touchstone and Disney. Where are you on 3 pictures a year
I don't know.
as a writer, performer, creative producer?
Yeah, I don't know what happened to that. You know, I started off with Tom Wilhite, who was an executive at Disney right after Splash. And he was actually the one who initiated that proposal to me. He said, would you like to come and work here? Of course, and he was the only one in town, really, who had expressed interest in me producing and writing. They saw something in me. Immediately, we had signed the papers. Tom Wilhite was out, Kim LeMaster was in, and Dick Berger were running the studio. New guys. Hi, I'm John Candy. I just signed a deal. How do you do? I was wondering if you could look at some of the things I had. And Kim was very nice, and Dick was very nice. I just started working on a screenplay called Con Job with Doug Steckler, Mike Short, and John McAndrew, who were working. While we were putting the Schmengies together, I was working on the screenplay with those guys. I was kind of supervising this. A real funny story about a college town that was taken over by a prison, and how the lives of the people in that town now have a prison in this beautiful old stately college. As soon as that draft was finished, Kim LeMaster was out, Dick Berger was out, Jeffrey Katzenberg is in. Hello, my name is John Candy. I was here a little while ago. I never had an office. Anyway, here's the script. We don't like it. Okay. I'll be down here if you need me. I'm over here. Give us some time to get settled in here. We'll see what happens. And that's really where it is. I don't know. They're off making other things, and me, I went off and did, I think, 3 or 4 other pictures in the interim. So I really don't know where that is. There was another project. There's a couple projects that I had worked on for them, but I think that deal is kind of over. I just got caught in a shuffle.
When you express the kind of admiration you've expressed in the past, and you talk about British comic actors, whether Alec Guinness or Alistair Sim, Peter Sellers, then talk about Americans that have given you pleasure, Abbott and Costello, the Three Stooges.
Walter Matthau.
Walter Matthau. Are you and Eugene, is there any of the Abbott and Costello that you admired, or the Three Stooges, that you tried to incorporate into Armed and Dangerous, just in terms of the physical comedy and use of each other?
In spirit, I think it's there, yeah. Have you ever seen Gene do Bud Abbott? The classic Bud Abbott. I mean, he has him down to a T. There are touches of that in our work, I think, with all of us in SCTV, with Joe as well, and with Marty and Dave and Rick. Everybody's got touches of those things, and when we work together, little sparks happen like that. Working with Gene, there's a wonderful rapport. The two characters are, usually the characters we always play are kind of vulnerable characters, the Schmengies or Dr. Tongue and Woody Tobias Jr. on the 3D horror films with Count Floyd, and there's always a little sensitivity in the characters. It's always fun. It's very easy to work with Eugene. There's writing the scenes that we have for the show, or scenes in the picture, seem to flow. The dialogue comes out. It's easy writing with Eugene, and he finds it the same, I think. And there's just a real, that's overused, but there is a nice chemistry between the two of us.
All right, on that we will take a break.
Okay.
We'll be right back with John Candy. John Candy is with us. I was talking to you during the commercial break and saying I've been announcing these things about movies you did, you didn't do, deals you have with all of these companies. You're a star. They say John Candy's worth $1 million plus a movie. What are you doing next? I mean, Armed and Dangerous is available to moviegoers. What's next in your career?
Well, there's a possibility of a picture with Mel Brooks called Spaceballs this fall.
And you can tell him the B. Arthur story that you know all about him.
Yes, and I'll use
Drinks
that
in the
negotiating
nude.
with Mel. Mel is very difficult in negotiating, I hear. So that'll be the next month and a half of negotiating with Mr. Brooks. And I think that's going to work out. I'd love to work on that. And then there's a picture this January, February, that would be 87. John Hughes wrote a script for Paramount, and Howard Deutsch, I believe, is set to direct it. As yet, it is untitled. And very funny story, hysterically funny story. I laughed a lot when I read this, and I'm looking forward to working on that.
I have something else I want to ask you, because I remember once having a conversation with you, and you had gone into a Pritikin plan, and after Splash had been finished, and before you'd gone back to work,
Yep,
you had
before
at
Brewster's, yeah.
one point lost something like 70,
Yes.
75 pounds?
Put 50 back on, thank you.
Did you?
Yep. Got to go back again, Brian.
But let me
I
ask,
keep running that play.
what was the advice that your buddy, is it Alex Karras? The man who happens to be very fortunate, married to Susan Clark?
Yeah, stop eating after...
He said you can eat anything you want all day.
stop after 6 o'clock, I think it was. Don't eat after 6 o'clock. And you can't start like at 1 minute after midnight either. He says, you know, when you get up in the morning, you can eat anything you want all day. And it worked for him. That's the diet he was on. And you remember, he was a big guy. He went right down.
But he was a football player who killed people, so
Yes,
I mean,
that's
he
true.
had a reason.
He had that going for him, didn't he?
But then I remember, too, when you were going to be an athlete, if not a journalist or a court reporter,
That's
the number
right.
of careers you've had.
Yes, candle salesman. And I lost my kneecap to that. Not one day in the pro ranks did I make it.
You can
And I
do
got
it
the
on
arthritis,
film.
but I've got the arthritis to prove it now, though.
Have you really?
Yeah, ooh, boy.
So when you talk about candles, I don't forget that summer when you were out selling Christmas table napkins and candles. A traveling salesman
Yes,
who
I
had
was.
Christmas table napkins in his bag?
Yep. The trunk was filled with Halloween, Valentine's Day, Easter, happy birthday greetings from the Disney characters. Oh, yes. Oh, that was fun. And then I ended up in rehearsing for a show with Gail Garnett, Valerie Bromfield, Ron Ulrich, Don LeGros. God, I'm probably leaving some people out. And Stephen Katz directed it. And we toured the parks in this town and worked at the Poor Alec. And while I was rehearsing for that, I was supposed to be on the road. And they finally caught up to me and fired me.
Are you
And
talking
he vowed I'd never work in that business again.
Are you talking about, was this at the same time as the Children's Theater when you were doing things like Treasure Island and going from playground to school to those days?
No, that was after that. That was just after that. I finally realized, no, I'm not going to do anything else. I'm going to stick with acting. So I went right into Rumpelstiltskin and Treasure Island. 4-man company. We did 20 characters. God.
Oh, you're throwing the Jolly Jesters in too now,
The
are
Jolly
you, John?
Jesters with James Iwasek. Absolutely, I will.
I know what you're up to, and we know what's in your future. Am I correct in believing that your wife, Rose, and your daughter and your son are very happy in their new home in California?
I hope so.
Well, a bit of a shock now to find out that your daughter, Jennifer,
Ah, we
was the
don't
one who
like
said,
it.
I don't like the winter.
Yeah, so I
She
moved.
was 4 at the
Boy, I
time.
tell you, she's got me wrapped around this.
But things are good for you in
Oh,
California?
yeah, it's real nice. We still keep the home up in Toronto. We'll never get rid of that. It was hard because we were commuting so much and traveling. I felt it was easier to keep everybody in one place and give it a little continuity to our life and to, especially to the kids. That's why we decided maybe it'll be best down there, since most of my work is generated out of Los Angeles now. Make a lot of sense to stick close there. So it's nice. We're living right near Joe Flaherty, and Andrea Martin's up the street, and Marty Short is about 5 minutes away. Jim Belushi is 3 doors up from Joe Flaherty, so it's kind of that community's all together again. I'm just trying to get Eugene and Deb to move down, and Catherine, and we'll have everybody down there.
That's going to be some party when B. Arthur throws it. She'll be in seventh heaven with
she'll
all
be
of you
sorry
there.
she said that.
I've enjoyed being with you.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. See you at the airport, John.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Thanks so much, Brian.
Pleasure. Thank
That was
you.
great.
I enjoyed it.
Oh, that was